Hello, welcome to this section. Today we are going to talk about the literature review. So the first question is, what is the literature? So in your mind, maybe the literature remains the journal, but the literature actually includes many types. It includes all written sources relevant to the topic you have selected. So the first source may be scientific journals or clinical journals, and then textbooks or thesis or dissertation, or maybe conference papers, or maybe some website report by professional organizations or government agencies, or maybe some monographs or encyclopedias. So what is a literature review? You may hear a lot about the literature review, but what is the exactly meaning of the literature review? Literature review is central to scholar work and disciplined inquiry. So you need an organized written presentation of what you find when you review the literature. So from the literature review, you can summarize what has been published on a topic by scholars and presents relevant and research findings. So remember, the literature review is not list all of the literature. It's to synthesize and evaluate the literature and write down in your own words. And remember, if you are in different phase of the research process, you have different purpose, by literature review. So I will give you this table I borrowed from the textbook written by Gray, Grohl, and Southland in 2017. It's the major textbook of this course. So they listed different phases of research process. And in these different phases, they have different purpose to use the literature review. For example, when you choose the research topic and how literature can help you, and literature can help you to narrow down the topic by reading widely about what is known and what is not known. So you can identify relevant concepts and you can narrow down your topic. And for the second phase, if you want to state of the research problem, and you need to write down the background and the significance of the problem. So you search books and articles to provide an overview of the topic. And also you search government reports and other documents to find facts about the size, cost, and the consequence of the research problem. So that means to write down to understand what the significance of the research problem. And then you synthesize literature to identify what's the specific gap in knowledge that this study will address. So at this phase, the literature review will help you to do all these kind of jobs. And for you, if you want to write down the research framework, so you need to find and read relevant frameworks from the literature. And you also need to develop conceptual definition of concepts from the literature review. And when you go to the purpose, research questions, or hypothesis, you need to review the literature and state the purpose of the study. And you need to decide whether there is adequate evidence to state a hypothesis. And then you need to review the literature. In this part, you do need to find evidence to support why the selected methods are appropriate and summarize current empirical knowledge that is related to the topic. And then you go to the methodology part. You need to compare research design of reviewed study to select the most appropriate design for your own study. And you need to identify possible instruments or measures of variables. And you need to describe performance of measures in previous studies and provide operational definition of concepts. And then you need to develop a strategy based on what has been learned from studies in the literature. So you do the sampling plan, and then you learn from the research literature. And in the findings, when you write down the findings, when you either face or write down the findings, you need to refer to statistic textbook to explain the results of the data analysis. And then if you want to write down the discussion, you need to compare the findings with those of previously reviewed study, and you need to return to the literature to find new reference to interpret unexpected findings. And also, in the discussion part, you may need to refer to several sources to relate the findings to the research framework. And also, in the part of conclusions, you may need to review the literature, and on the basis of previous literature and the current studies findings, you draw your conclusions. And then you discuss implications for nursing clinical practice, administration, and education. So that's kind of, idea about which phases you are and how the literature will help you to go through these phases. And so I will go through a little bit about the major stages of the literature review. So usually we divide it into 3 stages, but they should be interrelated. The first one is searching the literature, and then processing the literature and writing the literature review. And regarding the searching the literature, you do need to find out some website or some database. So this table listed several major databases for nursing, such as the first famous database is CNAIL and Medline, PubMed, PsychoInfo, and other things. And this table we borrowed from the EBSCO website. And they also describe what the database include. So you will see which kind of journals or which kind of literatures will be covered in this database. And I also want to mention about one very important database. It's ProQuest Dissertations and Thesis. This is the website of the database. Because from this database, you can look through some dissertations and theses, and you can learn from other colleagues. And when you search the literature, they do need some strategies. I hope you will learn some strategies to search the literature. I will not tell you some more information, detailed information here, but usually we may use the keywords and use the author to find out the literature, or we may use some complex search, such as use the or and not, we call Boolean operators, or we may search some keywords in title, abstracts, journal names, so we call location operators. Or we may use some near, with, AZZ, the positional operators, to search your literature concretely and accurately and sufficiently. And you also can look some literature from the internet. But just remember, because when you do the literature review, you will get a lot of literatures. So at this moment, you do need to have a reference management software to help you to manage all this literature. Try to use EndNote or maybe reference managers or any other types of reference manager. So you will see this is really helpful. And then you will need to processing the literature. You have all this kind of literature. First, you need to read the literature, but do not start to read the whole pages. I mean, you need to, from skimming to comprehending to read. So this is kind of rules for us to read. So you get some pictures about the reference, and then you will decide if you want to read it in detail, you can read in detail. And then when you processing the literature, you also need to remind yourself, you need to appraise or analyze the sources or the literatures. You may need to appraise to evaluate the individual study, and also you need to compare, among all these kind of studies. So when you processing the literature, you do need to have these steps. And then you need to sort in the sources, and then you synthesize the sources. Those are major steps in the literature review. So you will write down your literature review by yourself, and by doing so, you will learn how to do these steps. And then you need to write down the review of the literature. And remember, in the literature review, you need to, in your own words, to express the ideas. So you need to express the ideas clearly based on the sources. And this some criteria may help you to understand how to write a very good literature review. So you may ask yourself the coverage. Did the writer provide evidence of having reviewed sufficient literature on the topic? Or does the review indicate that the writer is sufficiently well informed about topic and has identified relevant studies? So this criteria can be used by yourself to critique your own literature review, or you can use this criteria to critique others' literature review. Except this coverage, you can to evaluate if the literature review is understandable. So you may ask yourself the questions: does the written review indicate that the writer has understood and synthesizes what is being studied, and have similarities and difference of what was found between described? And also you need to critique the coherence. And you need to ask questions such as, does the writer make a logical argument related to the significance of the topic and the gap to be addressed by the purpose study? Or the accuracy of the literature review. Does the writer's attention to detail give the reader confidence in the conclusions of the review? So this criteria is from the book written by Dr. Grew, Byrne, and Gray in 2013. So I want just to mention again, literature review is central to scholar work and disciplined inquiry. You have to practice. So let's practice. So thank you for today, and see you next time.